Hello, welcome. Sorry to wake you up. This is the International Dagger Symposium. We are back on a short hiatus of like 6 months because we do this whenever we find time and have interesting stuff to say. This time we will be talking about the more material side of things, having two experts on that with us, talking about Peter Johnsson and Dr. Fabrice Cognot. Um, for those of the people out there who don't know who you are, Peter, could you give us a short introduction?
Yes, I'm happy to be invited in this. I'm Peter Johnsson. I work as a swordsmith, and I try to approach the craft from the perspective of study of originals, as well as exploring the possibilities of the craft in a more timeless idea. But for tonight, I think it's like a side track or a parallel track for my major study, which is the sword. But alongside the sword comes the dagger. So it's certainly an interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about this.
Great. So, Fabrice, who are you?
Oh dear. Well, I'm Fabrice Cognot. I have a PhD in medieval archaeology, and well, I'm a bladesmith or weaponsmith, whatever you call it. Sometimes I make swords, sometimes I make daggers, sometimes I make what people want me to make and give me money for that. Not enough, but well, that's another topic. And I've been studying the dagger alongside the rest of my medieval weapons in local collections, even though I could not include it in the final dissertation of my PhD because there's just too much work. But I've been keeping an eye on that, and I'm still learning and trying to understand the making processes and also the use of the weapons, because I do a bit of historical European martial arts. I've been doing it for about like 23 years now, and I'm still learning that as well. So and that's basically it.
So, um, for the people who don't know who you are, Björn, who the hell are you? What are you doing?
I'm Björn. I'm an instructor for Visby Historical Fencing School, and I kind of like fetishize on daggers. Well, of course, I also instruct like longsword and do messer and stuff like this. But my passion, my true passion, is perhaps daggers.
Hmm.
Yep. I myself, being Jan Hoffmann of Tremonia Fech in Dortmund, Germany, I exclusively do daggers and adjacent things because I have other people to do the longsword stuff that nobody cares about really. Just the fringe HEMA thing. Maybe at some point in time, people will do more longsword. Yes. So we have used the word dagger quite a few times in the past few minutes. Um, can any of you attempt on telling us what a dagger even is? Because I think it's pretty important to kind of define the terms that we're using before going on to using them for a while. What even is a dagger?
Yes. No, you go first,
Typical
please,
binary
man.
question, right?
It's a key question. Well, okay, I opened my mouth, so I guess it's mine now to carry on blabbering. What is it like? It's actually rather easy to define by what it's not. It's not a sword, basically, even less a hammer, even less a turkey, whatever you call it. It's a short bladed weapon that is generally carried on the belt, and and that's basically it. Saying more would be saying too much sometimes, depending on the era and on the area. The dagger could have several other meanings in addition to the forms it could take over the course of the years in Europe. I mean,
It's a knife that is one of its primary purposes is to cause harm through violence. Um, it's a great overlap to the short sword. And depending on the time period we're looking at, many of the weapons we call swords in one time period would be called daggers in another time period. So in the interest of finding a definition, we often make life unnecessarily complex and complicated for ourselves, because I think a dagger can be many things, just like it can, there are certain things it cannot be, but daggers can be really, really big, really crossing over into the area where you otherwise find short swords. They can have many different edges or no edges at all. It's really a very, in one way, very difficult thing to define. But as you say, with some other things, you know it when you see it. And I think that's perhaps the easiest way to define it. Any more strict definition than that will be not very helpful, really.
Because it would exclude a lot of things that we would know as a dagger when we saw them.
Exactly, exactly.
So you would say that the main difference between a dagger and a knife would be the primary use in combat? Is that kind of the definition you draw in your head? Again,
I think that's
one
of the features of the dagger is that it has it's designed with violence in mind. It doesn't preclude other uses, but I think it's a bit in many situations it's rather rude to use your dagger at your kitchen table for cutting up bread. It's a thing you don't do, even if you could. That's why you have buy knives on many daggers. So I think because of its intended purpose, there are areas where you won't you won't bring the dagger in a polite company, so to say. So it's very much defined by its surrounding culture, I would say. And who, yes, and we will I think later come into who carries the dagger and when. And I think that is as important as its possible tactical or design features to define what it is.
Well, basically here you hinted at the social and cultural aspects of the dagger, in addition to its function, primary function as a tool to harm people, and I believe that you can't really separate the two. You know, as you say, the dagger, you know, you don't use your dagger to slice your bread with, because the dagger is depending again on the era and time, but a dagger is a statement. In a way, mm-hmm. it's a affirmation of the more or less, and this is basically false because, you know, details, but more or less it's a statement about the possibility of using the weapon. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the dagger is the primary function, practical function of the dagger is to be displayed, to be open carried, you know, to use a nowadays term. Also because reasons, you know, because you can carry a sword and the dagger is more readily available or permitted by the local laws. But the simple fact of displaying, not really ostentatiously, but sometimes really, really visibly, mm-hmm. A dagger at your belt, say in the late Middle Ages in the 15th century, in any city of Western Europe, would mean you are a man, basically. It's a sign of virility and of the possibility of relying to the use of the dagger, to the final use of the dagger in whichever context. Which doesn't mean the dagger was carried with this in mind, you know, but it's part of the how to say that, of the character of the weapon, more so than with a knife, actually.
I wonder if it, in some periods and some situations, it will also signify a kind of a legal status, mm-hmm. that you are. I mean, certainly, you know, the Pugio of the Roman legionnaire was a weapon. If I'm correct in my understanding, you couldn't carry your gladius off duty, but you could carry your Pugio. So carrying a pujo is a sign that you are indeed a serving legionnaire. And in other times, in other periods, having a weapon knife, a dagger, or a sax could mean that you are like a fully legal and responsible member of society who has the right to defend your own life by taking a life. It's a kind of a as you say, a status sign, but also it has further sort of implications than that. And then, of course, any ruffian or any cutthroat can carry a dagger. And again, you will recognize if it's someone who carries a dagger to show his status, or if it's someone who carries a dagger to scare people. And not using the dagger for cutting bread, well, yes, of course, but again, in polite society, because just like you can stir your soup with a bayonet. It's not your preferred tool, but in a pinch you will do it. So I think it's
well, some bayonets do work better in that regard, for stereotypes for really being used as bayonets, but that's another topic, isn't it?
Yes.
But I think I remember I was at one of your lectures, Peter, where you talked about like the symbolic nature of the sword, and you touched a bit on how daggers work in this regard. And I saw that you previously had a bollock dagger with you, which kind of is very much like Fabrice said here, a virility symbol. You're displaying your manhood essentially. Very very often an exaggerated form of it, but you're carrying it as a symbol of who you are, and I think that kind of relates a bit to this the symbol of what a weapon means, and the dagger is something you could carry in many situations, maybe more situations than a sword, because of legality and practicality, not to because it's just smaller.
Yes, and because of the nature of knife and dagger fighting, it's even if the sword is a personal weapon for personal honor. I mean, the dagger is perhaps even more so, but in a more desperate measure, it's really a last-ditch thing, or for very dark deeds. So it has definitely a different character and sort of cultural meaning and connotations than you would see the sword. And I mean, we can speculate about that, and I don't know how applicable it is in different time periods. We can speak about it in very general terms, but revenge and defending your life in a desperate situation, it's about doing violence on helpless people. It's about the callousness of professional soldiers. All of that has to do with the dagger, and the mercy killing, the miséricorde, the taking of a hostage. All of that can be done at the point of a dagger. Dark plans and conspiracies, they go with the dagger. So it's a weapon with certainly very specific connotations attached to it.
Well, certainly, actually, the sword has a regal aspect to it, or a certain lean, strong, or whatever, with nobility that the dagger doesn't. Basically, the dagger is the weapon of the gutter. Could be worn by noblemen and by princes and kings alike, but could also be used by just basically anyone without soiling itself, because it's already a weapon of little status of sorts. It's funny because in the early 17th century treatise by French master, his name already. Oh, I don't know. Talked about him several times. Well, basically, his book is about sword and dagger first, and then single sword, and it starts with sword and dagger, which he calls poignard, François Dancy, because he said no nobleman will use a dagger, so here's how to use it. And then it turns to the single sword because that's better. But I think or maybe it's the other way around. But it's this notion that the dagger is for the dirty fight, and you don't use it when you're a man of standing. But here's how to use it, because reasons. So yeah, there's that definitely. The dagger is. I mean, it can take even in a single geographical area and time. It can take so many forms, so many. It can be, very basic and simple, very ornate and expensive. Show great craftsmanship. But in no, I'm speaking rubbish because the dagger has been at some point associated with knightly fighting and knightly arts from the late 14th century to the end of the medieval period, or its last outburst. This phantom of chivalry they still had in the 15th century among the high nobility. I remember the fights of Boucicaut in the very early 15th century, starting with the lance on horseback, then the sword, then the dagger. Dagger was here in the panoply of the knights, along with the lance, along with the sword, along with the poleaxe, favorite of mine, and it didn't last actually, well, it lasted what it lasted, like maybe a century and a half, being associated with the rest of this. Jan, well the first pages of Fiore de Liberis, Fiore di Battaglia, with in the margins, the depiction of a dagger along with a poleaxe and a spear and the like. So it was, in a way, that there was this attempt and it was accepted, but it still remained equally used by non-nobles for non-noble deeds, basically. So maybe that's why the dagger didn't keep this exclusivity and exclusiveness and aura that it could have had at some point. Also because, or maybe it was readily available, and I don't know, reasons.
Is there a parallel to draw between the weapon forms of the rifle and the handgun? If the sword is more of a
yes.
rifle that has more of a professional or military or official or state-like, unless you're a hunter, of course, or some political desperado. But otherwise, the handgun is more of a very sort of personal defense weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This kind of brings me on to one of our next questions, because what you're referring to is that these guys, the rondel daggers, seems to, from what I can understand, have had a slightly more, at least in the beginning, a kind of connection to more higher status or nobility, and then kind of migrated down to the general population over time. Now, how do you, because rondel dagger, I think, is a very modern term. How do you kind of define these guys from others daggers?
It's really the shape of the hilt that defines the rondel dagger. To my mind, Fabrice, would you agree with that?
Oh yes, totally. Yeah.
However, the rondel daggers also come in various shapes and variations. Sometimes the rondels are so sort of reduced or refined or designed that you almost don't recognize them as rondels anymore. But you can see that, yes, it's a rondel dagger somehow, somewhere. There can be a minimal little disc towards the blade, and the back pommel disc could be turned into a more of a tubular pommel kind of thing, and it's still a rondel dagger. I mean, you can't really describe it as anything else, but they go all over the map. And blade types, they can come with just about any kind of blade type. However, there are some certain styles of rondel daggers that tend to have some certain styles of blades that you won't find with other types of daggers. So they can be quite specific as well, which is why they are such an interesting topic of study.
Peter pretty much nailed it. There's so much variation, and within each variation you can have so much community of forms and shapes, as you say, like families or I mean, that there are several types of daggers, and Peter will know which ones I'm referring to, that you can really put side by side, and they look like twins, like factory made in vast series, and they're not. I mean, they were handmade by people who knew their stuff. At least they did. Yeah, but the term roundel dagger actually already appears in inventories at the time, at least in French, like a dagger well or dagger model. But obviously, with such inventories, they are not illustrated. Well, a few are, but not the French ones. And so we have no clue of what they looked like, these daggers that are named dagger well in these sources. But
when is that? Sorry, Fab. What is that? 14th century already, or
it's early 15th, and
okay.
after that, yeah. It's the inventory. Oh, I could dig it out. The inventory of the armory of Duke Philip of Burgundy after his death. So very early 15th century. But there are all other very interesting names, things named in there, like épée volante and these kind of things. That would deserve a little bit more study, but time. Yeah, and it's actually off topic for today.
Yeah, but okay, but if they use it in that context, it means that it probably was they used it because they assumed that everybody else who read it would know what this meant. So it had some meaning.
Yeah, the term is also used. Same again. I need to dig into the papers, but in judicial documents like letters of remission. When daggers were used in cases of violence, basically, in taverns or in the street, the officials mentioned the use of a dagger well or a dagger cuillette or any type of thing that could better help define and register rather the case, and help get the remission that they basically the letter was about. All this quite often actually the general situation is that the terms remain still very vague, very, very unclear. It's quite certain that those writing this and reading this knew what they were talking about and didn't need to mention much, to continue on this comparison, but using the word gun, you don't specify the maker, the caliber, or whatever details you can have on it. A handgun is a handgun, basically,
But there seemed the people writing these legal documents, they seem to see an importance in mentioning what kind of dagger it is, right? So
it's rather because
why they would think it's important. Is there a certain connection of certain dagger types to certain strata or whatever?
Actually, to my understanding, it's rather to establish a link between the tool of the violence and the perpetrator. Une dagger well une sienne dagger well, or une sienne dague or ancien couteau, whatever, just to make sure that the tools and weapons of the crime and the perpetrator were identified as such and described as precisely and succinctly as possible as well. So there's no particular link with associating the roundel dagger with this or that strata of society, even though is it more feeling than really a clear understanding, or maybe just a side effect, a kind of collateral damage of the documentation we have to study the dagger as it appears in period artwork, is that most of the artwork we have represents most of the time nobility, especially effigies and shit like that. And the roundel dagger is more represented than, for instance, the ballad dagger or kidney dagger, to remain polite. But it's probably a kind of biased vision because both exist at the same time. We can't redefine that. The ballad dagger was more used by the non-nobles, and the roundel dagger was more used by the nobility or upper classes. It's it would be wrong to ascertain that, or just to think of that in such terms. We have depictions also of very high, I mean, paintings like the early Flemish paintings in the mid 15th century at the court of Burgundy, of very, very high and rich and powerful people with ballad daggers. So I mean, both coexisted without really any. It was a great deal of overlap, and without any specificity to class or wealth or anything else, really.
Yes, and the business part of the dagger, the blade, even though there are some certain blade types that are more common on Ballock daggers, and there are certain blade types that are more common on rondel daggers, most blade types can be seen, I think, in both types of hilts. Wouldn't you say, Fab?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I'm thinking of a very interesting, beautiful source from the very late 14th, early 15th century, with great helms and the girdles were on the thighs, and kind of things, and the knights. It's a story of Tristan and the quest of the Grail and all these medieval Star Wars things, and the knights, or the protagonist in there, would equally wear rondel daggers and Ballock daggers. I mean, even the same character from one play to another. There was certainly, on the other hand, a lot of symbolism associated with the display of the dagger, the way it was depicted. I mean, the way they were drawn in artwork, but also linked to the way they were carried openly by day or at night. I mean, you could carry your dagger either thrust vertically through your through your pouch, basically, or horizontally, or with a hilt pointing down, or with a hilt pointing up, depending on the time of the day or the people you're hanging out with, or whatever you wanted to express, if it was such a thing. You could also, better fit with a point-up carry or point-down carry. All the reasons behind that could be pragmatic, like ease of access and ease of drawing out of the sheet, but could be also equally very much symbolic. I mean, you pointed at the obvious symbolism of the Ballock dagger. You can't deny it, and knowing the mindset of Western Europe, in especially medieval or early Renaissance times, they would certainly think of it the way you, little naughty, think of it as well.
So can I ask a follow-up question here? So because you mentioned, both of you, different blade types, and it seems like, and you mentioned that certain blade types are more common on rondel daggers, and some blade types are more common on Ballock daggers. And one of the things that kind of, at least to my mind, has featured a lot in this HEMA community is the presence or the absence of edges. So now I think it's quite obvious that all kinds of daggers can and cannot have edges, but some daggers just are edgeless, or have like the tri-section or square section, or these kind of things. Do you have like is this simply just easier to construct? I mean, from a constructional point of view, or is it easier to construct in order to have an armor penetrating quality? What is the reason for this kind of, for not having an edge? For having an edge, I think is easy because it's sharp and you can cut stuff, but for not having an edge.
One of those good questions.
You go first.
I think, I spoke up. So it's okay. So I think it's a matter of personal taste, really. For someone, I mean, you have those huge military daggers that are like little, something you can open a door with, very sturdy. But the truly, like, and they can be like huge spikes. I've seen one of those daggers, one of the very few from the Castillon find, a cruciform dagger. It's rhomboid or diamond-shaped spike. I mean, you could possibly cut with it if you really put your mind and will to it, but it's definitely made just for making holes in things. And there is a large number of daggers that are absolutely, their whole design concept is to be thrusting weapons. You wouldn't really do much of effective cutting with them. But then there are many designs that in ingenious ways combine a thick back or a thick cross-section with very, very acute edges, combining various sort of asymmetrical cross-sections with hollow grinds and reinforced points. And it's really like equilibristic display of the grinder's skill to make these blades. And I think that's part of the value in a blade. It's you can admire the skill of the grinder, and some of the very fine examples, of course, are also etched and further embellished. But you can absolutely see that there is these blades, apart from being absolutely murderous, they also express a certain kind of joy of making. There is a joy of skill of making, and they will put a lot of modern knives to shame when it comes to edge thickness and sharpness. They are really very dedicated blades, really thin, really scary, sharp edges that combines with a back thickness of 7 to 10 millimeters, like a combination of ice picks and straight razors in a very ingenious way. For modern knife and blade makers, the study of the medieval dagger can really be, you put yourself back in school, because there is a lot to learn there.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I'm always amazed. But who wouldn't be? Are they? You say the fineness of the craftsmanship. You can see, you can taste on generally on period weapons, but especially on daggers, and this harmony of form and shape and function and taste. Even if these tastes we can barely get a grasp on, that will always be flawed. But I loved it when you mentioned the joy of making, because well, that's what we do, don't we? And the display of taste by the maker for the customer, or be it by the way an end customer that would buy a finished product, or a commissioner ordering certain things to his specific tastes. I mean, on any type of medieval dagger, you can have the same excess of attention and decoration and bling and quality and flaws as on swords or armor. There were the same range of appreciation or lack thereof, or both, was applied to the dagger, and which continues on to the Renaissance era. I mean, there's nearly as much work. It's quite comparable, at least, on so-called left-hand daggers, or all these poignards and whatever they carried back then, that there is on the swords they were carried with. It's less time, but it's the same amount of skill and the same dedication to the craft, basically.
Yeah, and I think to appreciate what the medieval dagger could be, you have to, well, first of all, of course, you need to study originals, and best is to get your hands on them. Next best is to make pilgrimages to the museums that have them on display, and there is a lot of daggers on display. So it's not, if you really want to, it's not really difficult to get a better understanding. And when you have an opportunity to see them, look really closely, take notes, make drawings, take photos, tell yourself what you're seeing as you're seeing them, because you think you remember, but you don't. You need to memorize, you need to verbalize, you need to conceptualize what it is you're seeing, because they can be quite well put together and complex things. And I find it inspiring and awe-inspiring to see how, I don't know how to describe it. There's some kind of free-spirited, unconventional approach to blade design when you see the medieval dagger that is so much more advanced and so much more forward and visionary in a way than you see in most contemporary blade work. We are so stuck into our definitions. We come back to that again. Is it a Bowie knife? Is it a folder? Is it, and it's supposed to be certain things. Or then it's an art knife, and then it's not good for anything. And there is no space in between there. And then you go to the medieval dagger and see, well, it's all about that. It's both art, and it's functional, and it's skilled, and it's thoughtful, and it's made with a sense of proportion and purpose and the rightness in craft. So it's a very consummate and sort of highly evolved object that is so easy to overlook because it's just a dagger, but it tells a lot about the time it was made in and what was important and what you took pride in and what was like. Yeah, well, I come back to this thing with they express a joy and an urge of making that is, to me as a maker, that's my perspective. That's the angle I come from. You can see both the rules and the tension in breaking the rules and trying things. They seem to be much more varied in some ways than swords were. They are like 150 years ahead of the design of the sword. If that explodes in the 16th century, the design of the dagger explodes in the 15th century, or even late 14th century. And you start to see all of these fantastic variations with asymmetrical cross sections and ridges and grooves and hollows that combine in a way that create optimal edge angles, combining toughness and sharpness and elegance, yes, and weight reduction in fantastic ways.
I'm amazed. Recently, I've been browsing through the finds from the Netherlands.
Yes.
The Dutch started digging in their mud, and they found stuff, and this is glorious. Bollock daggers with cross sections you can barely dream of in non-Euclidean ways, and still harmonious to look at, even though twisted and warped by time and mud and shit. But it's this great degree of variability and creativity in a way. And some of them you can also associate together, this one reminds me of that one, and they have the same, I don't know, the same character, the same feel, and without, going back to what you said, I think that especially even more so, when looking at medieval daggers or early Renaissance daggers, do what this man said, guys. He is right. He doesn't know it yet, but he's so right. Actually, he knows. One failure would be to try to say, oh yes, no, I know, and now I understand, and to categorize things and to reduce things to tiny boxes and definitions and stuff like that. Daggers always had me surprised, and it's great. You never know what next thing you're going to look at and understand, and the more you look at daggers, same with swords, and actually same with all weapons, but daggers specifically, the more you look at them, the more when you look back at the others, it kind of unlocks things.
Yes.
And it's this great upward spiral that we are snuck in, that makes it really, really worth it. You mentioned elegance. I cannot underline enough the importance of elegance in the medieval or Renaissance Western European dagger. Something so easily overlooked. Also, because of the reenactors market, which is swamped really and bad stuff under poor propositions of what are presented as reproductions, but they are not. Most people would think the dagger as a low-key weapon. It's not. We just kept like saying that for the last 15 minutes rather. But so I believe that we have to fight against that, against the notion that the dagger could be or should be. Of course it could, but it was rarely the case that it was just a bland, simple bit of metal stuck on a bit of wood, or the other way around. There was always, even on the the simpler daggers I saw, I got the chance to study, or just to look at quality pictures of, a tiny thing, a bit of this, a bit of that would confirm that attention was paid to detail and to the harmony of the thing, be it a visual harmony or a harmony of use, basically. But you can't really have one without the other. Not that they are linked, but they are equally important in the days of yore. For the making of a weapon must be tasteful, and I'm not using the term beautiful because it's very much relative. Tasteful and useful. These are two sides of a multifaceted coin, I would say, or D20 dice, maybe. I don't know. Something like that.
Roll for sanity.
So if I can just summarize because I was of the I had an idea that maybe the reason that you chose to make a dagger completely without edges was simply because it would be easier to construct. Because I was thinking, yeah, maybe just making an edge, it takes more skill.
You have to do less, basically.
Yes, so that was because I don't know anything about construction. So that was my idea. And basically you're saying that this is at least doesn't seem to be the main reason, when at least not supported by the ones you're looking at.
You make a dagger without edges because you want a dagger without edges.
Mm-hmm.
It has like a spike, a steel spike will be a completely ruthless and extremely efficient tool to make holes with. And if you really want to effortlessly puncture holes in your fellow beings, a spike will serve you very, very well. And it looks really nasty and scary. And the guy with that spike in his hand looks very sort of hell-bent on causing pain and violence. So it's a scary thing. But any blade will be scary. But I'm overdoing that part. But I mean, it's more of a, the spike dagger is made for a person who knows that this is enough. It's a quick thrust. I can place it in the right place, and that's it. That'll do. So it's for the person who wants a spike, and it can be three-sided, or it can be four-sided, it can be flat or hollow grind. It doesn't really matter all that much. It makes a nice hole through most fabrics and things people might be wearing, and possibly even a hidden mail shirt underneath. So it's a very effective thrusting weapon. Of course, on then the compromise of you won't be doing any cutting, but perhaps this is a person who knows that it's not the cutting in a knife fight that will really end it, it's the thrust. So I want a good spike. That's what I want.
Which is true. I mean, people die from stab wounds to a much larger degree than
dare they. Yeah.
No, I think what you said about the gracefulness of design, if I may return to that, since it's a favorite subject, I think there is one part of this that we underestimate and often overlook, that can often be a flaw if you forget about it, and that is there is a different idea of how you go about appreciating shape and what design is. Of course, it has to do with function, but it's also tradition. It's how you learn how to make a thing is also part of how you understand its design. And there tends to be rules of thumbs and traditions within crafts of how you think about an object, how you envision it, how you manifest it. And there is this concept, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, please correct me, Fab, but there is this sense of, a good craft needs to be done the right way. There is a right way to do things. It has to do with not just doing correctly and well. There is also even the aspect of righteousness. If something is done well and right and to the proper rules, it's a good thing.
This is the way.
And it's very grounded in the crafts and the way and the mind of the craftsman, that you should do it properly or not at all. And to do it properly, part of that is to have a proper understanding of what the object is. And that's almost on a Platonic level, that you have a clear idea of the ideal shape.
Mm-hmm.
And to express that idea, you use abstract terms. And in some of the easiest forms or ways to do this is to think about a shape in a modular way. For example, for a certain dagger, perhaps the blade is 2 parts and the hilt is 1 part. So the overall design will be 2 + 1. And if you imagine it's like a ballock dagger, maybe the ballocks is like a certain whole number division of the hilt length. Perhaps this is another, perhaps whole number division of the whole. So rather than, as we do today, think about it as fractions of millimeters or inches, you think about it as parts of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And if you approach design that way, if you look at the original objects with those kind of glasses on, to see that all the parts relate to each other in specific ways, you can start to unlock like the principles of what was the proper way to make this thing. And then you can see how you can vary it by, perhaps instead of dividing it in 4, you divide it in 5, or multiply it with a different number to get a 3-to-1 or a 5-to-3. But you have a specific simple ratio where that can sort of define the parts of an object. I haven't done much research on daggers, but when you look at furniture or painting or houses, just about any object that is constructed with any amount of thought, you will start to see these patterns. And they also come, I think, in the descriptions of fighting, an understanding of measure, and even time is divided in like in modules to properly define and understand a fight. It was a way to conceptualize the world, bringing some kind of order in chaos.
So this kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you can see it, but this is like your drawing, right? About this.
Yes.
This is the
yes.
same.
That's right.
and I think there are variations and different sort of traditions in this. For example, I think north of the Alps, there is the same tendency in sword making as you see in architecture. South of the Alps, there is much more of a very clear and sort of, it's a clear use of modules. So the facade of a building displays very clearly all its component parts and dimensions in how the facade is structured and rhythmized in decoration. It is its own key. But north of the Alps, you have to know geometry. That's why the Italian architects disdainfully called the architecture north of the Alps for Gothic. It was dark. It was occult.
Ugly.
It was secret. It was like this. You had to know all of those construction outside the building to make sense of it. The hidden octagon, the hidden, like it's a hidden art, and you work a lot with also geometrical construction that then involve irrational numbers like the root 3 and root 2 and root 5 and the golden section. While in south of the Alps, you have it seems to be more of a love for whole number ratios. And you have the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci being a prime examples of this. It's not primarily, as it's said today, to illustrate the golden section. It's about modular design, because every part of the body is a module, like a whole number division of the whole. And Italian swords tend to be more modularly defined rather than geometrically. So you see more whole number divisions and multiplications in Italian swords and south of the Alps designs than you see in north, at least so far as to what I've seen. And when you look at Messers, interestingly enough, it seems like the Messer is mostly based on modular design, even those made north of the Alps. So my suspicion is that a careful study of medieval daggers will reveal a tendency to go for modular rather than geometrical design, if you can sort of see the difference there. And I think it's good to be mindful that if these ideas about a structure of thought and a principle of design is accepted, we must understand we're talking about centuries and lots of different geographical locations. So there will be variation, but there are variations within traditions, because this is all about conveying knowledge, about making sure the knowledge of how to work properly is taught to the next generation of craftsmen.
Oh, definitely. There was this. We underestimate these days, especially now that things go so fast and all this sorcery and technology we have at hand. That the skills, as you said, as you hinted at, were transmitted by within a strict structure of apprenticeship and mastership, and people doing the same trade, like father to son, in a way, and this inertia of tradition, also social tradition, but in addition to the craftsmanship itself, was something that it was too tangible, too visible, too close at the time for them to mention in the sources for the historian, and that we, looking back, have also from the other end of the looking glass, have a difficulty to spot, basically, because it was of a tremendous importance. The way to make a sword has changed and changes with every maker, but remained the same for centuries as well.
For me, as a layman, with anything connected to doing like smithing stuff, is it the same amount of work if I just imagine I make this triangular spike, or I make a triangular spike which is narrow enough at the sides to make a blade? Like, for me, the second one seems to be more work, like I'm doing additional steps to get there in my head. Are those actually additional steps to do when working on those, or is it just basically you're just doing a different thing, you take the same time, you're doing...
Starting with the notion that you have the proper tools to do any of these jobs, it's quite comparable, actually. The amount of plastic transformation, or hammering, basically, and the amount of grinding, and then a huge part, actually, of making a dagger or a sword is the hilting, is the fittings, you know, the grip and the handle and on swords, and sometimes the daggers also the pommel and guard, and this also takes time, sorry, and needs to be, as Peter pretty well underlined it, needs to be made properly according to a lot of factors like aesthetics, but are links with tradition and with the way to make a proper dagger. You can see that there is an example of dagger slash short sword slash not that short a sword slash anything else, which is the Swiss dagger, the Schweizer Degen or Schweizer Dolch, which starts basically in this alpine region as a two-edged thing with curved upper and lower guards, and it evolves to things with slimmer fittings and then thicker fittings, and then all the variations you can find. And in the early 16th century, all these highly decorated scabbards with the dents of death by Hans Holbein on it, and behind that, the notion that this dagger type was the expression, the almost ethnic national expression of Swissdom, you know. You can see the Swiss, I mean, in any other chronicles, but it is the cultural and ethnical weapon of the free citizen of the Swiss cantons, and they are really adamant with that. They're really proud of their daggers, of their crescent fitted daggers. It is, and nobody else would carry such a dagger, or it would be mistaken as a Swiss. An interesting thing, by the way, we have this fantastic tapestry about the here in in Dijon, in the Museum of Fine Arts, about the siege of Dijon by the Swiss and the people from the County of Burgundy in 1513. Tapestry was made a bit, maybe 10, 12 years later, and Dijon was allegedly besieged by the Swiss. So and a small contingent of people from the Holy Roman Empire. But nowhere on the tapestry you would see a Swiss dagger, because it would show the besiegers as being Swiss, which they were. But at the time the tapestry was made, my understanding is that it was no longer PC or admitted to say that Swiss did bad things to the French, because it was after Pavia and after a lot of political changes and after a lot of basically peacemaking with the Swiss, and so showing the Swiss in a non positive way would have been bad, and that's the reason why you can see Katzbalgers, you can see Ballot daggers, but not a single Swiss dagger inside. While the vast majority of the besiegers were Swiss, and in almost the huge majority of period artwork of the time, you could spot Swiss by the dagger he's wearing.
That would have been my question, but at the time the tapestry was made, people still knew about the connection of the Swiss
yes, definitely.
and the Swiss.
And the Swiss themselves would carry on.
Contemporary artwork shows it.
Yeah. But on these fine words, I will have to make my address, gentlemen.
Yes.
If Peter ever comes back, tell him, or maybe not, but tell him it was really a pleasure to see him. Pleasure to see you. Pleased to meet you, Björn.
Likewise.
Always good to see you, young mate. You really missed something in Dijon, but we had all the fun.
You didn't go?
No, I couldn't. Just live
stuff.
Oh, shit. I hope maybe in the future, if Fabrice isn't like going to, I won't invite that guy back because he's not like reliable. I hope maybe next year or the year
it will be my pleasure to have you. And able to go. Björn, if you want to drop by, you'll be most welcome.
Yeah, I've actually talked to my club right now and trying to persuade a small group to bring a contingent to Dijon next year.
We have time anyway. Anyway, so gentlemen,
thank you very much. And it was
thanks for having me. It allowed me to stay very fuzzy and blurry, but focused in my mind. And now I want to make daggers, but I don't have time for that because I'm really busy making swords these days, which is nice. I won't complain. Take care, and keep me posted.
You too.
Right?
All
Thanks.
right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, just like you, and you might have noticed, Björn and I could have listened to Peter and Fabrice for like hours on end. But we were on a bit of a time limit here, family business, other kind of obligations. So this kind of made the end of our discussion. But like if all of you beg hard enough, maybe we will have them back for a part 2. We can at least forward your begging towards them. I was like fascinated today. I learned quite a bit, and I hope everyone at the screens feels likewise. Other than that, Björn, is there anything that you want to say to the fine folks out there? Anything that you need to advertise? Anything that you need to say?
No, I think this was fantastic. I really appreciated that both Fabrice and Peter took the time to talk to us, and I think they answered a lot of questions, and I think that the discussions we had were very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have collected like questions on the interwebs, and we have made a list of questions to ask. And a lot of those, whilst not explicitly asked, were answered by just putting these 2 people in a room, just letting them go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to make to announce that your event Tremonia Fechtschule is coming. Tickets are coming online in probably by the time this video is published, it will already be online. And if you're really unlucky, it will already be sold out because they sell really fast.
Yeah, they kind of do. It's not the biggest of events. We keep it cozy, we keep it familiar. So when you're watching this, registration opens on 1st of June.
Yes.
When you're watching this, registration will be open or closed again, depending on how unlucky you are and how long the editing takes.
Yes.
Yes. If you want to learn stuff about daggers by inviting our dear Lille Björn, how can you do that?
Well, you can contact me through I exist in Facebook as Lillebjörn Rugstad, or you can contact me through Visby Historical Fencing School. We are on YouTube and Instagram and all these kind of things, social media things. And how about you?
Just Google Tremonia Fechten and you'll probably find a way to contact me. Look for Jan Hoff on Facebook. Look for the Tremonia Fechtschule if you want to visit us there. We will try to give contact information for Fabrice and Peter in the description of the video below. So you will find ways to contact them if you want to listen to them talk about weapons more, which I can just highly recommend.
Yes.
Yeah, buy Peter's books, buy their weapons, go and give them money. Go.
Yes. This was the book I previously just showed the page from. Very, very good book that he published together with Sixt Wessler from Deutsches Klingenmuseum.
In Solingen, yeah.
Yeah, in Solingen. So yeah, very good. And yeah, I think that will be.
We'll put all the stuff that we remember to put in the link section, comment section thingy below. We'll put all the stuff there. And yes, if people beg hard enough, we might invite them back for a part 2.
Yes, like you do. You're standing ovation until they come back, like at the concert.
Yeah, that's what we do.
All right. Thank you very much. And for the next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.